Hey, I'm Alex, and I'm going to talk about negotiation. So with all these platforms, you're 100% capable of able to negotiate with these folks. Just be respectful and all of that. But when you're negotiating, a key part is to understand your own scope. So for instance, if you're making a website, every aspect, every feature, every page that you have on that website increases the amount of effort. So when you're trying to negotiate, a lot of the negotiation, at least the easiest part, is often to, instead of trying to reduce the number or their hourly rate from, if they're like $50 an hour, trying to reduce them down to like $20 an hour is going to be tougher than trying to descope your own website. So instead of making maybe a 20-page website with like careers pages, blog, home screen, landing page, multiple products, prices, like having all those pages is going to be a lot of upfront work. The easiest way to reduce scope and to get the price down is to just look at your own website and see what you can take off, at least for the initial version. So that's the easiest way to start negotiation. The key is when you're descoping things is not sacrificing the main part of the product. I made a Mac app recently, and the actual implementation of the app is really tricky, but I didn't want to pay more than $300. So how do I get this developer, super talented guy, how do I get him to essentially come down from I think he was quoting me like $800 to make this Mac app with the UI, with all of these different features. So ultimately, in order to get that down to $300, it meant reducing some of the features, number one, but also taking that UI and making it essentially a default user interface. So instead of using like a super custom, beautiful interface that I got designed, we decided at least for the version 1 to just make a pretty basic Mac user interface that doesn't take them too much time to implement, but allows me to produce that first version that I can then use to test and get some data and then see, is it worth putting the extra $500 or $300 or whatever it costs to make the full version of the app. So that's number one, that's the easiest place to start. And then number 2, negotiation tactic, when you're trying to go after those hours and try to reduce the hourly rate, a lot of it is just, it's not to be mean. Like if somebody is charging like $50 an hour, it's because they're worth $50 an hour. If you come in and try to say, hey, like, I don't think you're worth $50 an hour, you should be at $20 an hour. I mean, that's an insult. You say like, your work is not as good as you think it is. No one wants to hear that. But instead if you say like, hey, like your work is phenomenal. I'm in awe of what you've been making. Like this is really great work and I would love to work with you. Unfortunately, I can't afford that $50 an hour rate. But if you'd be willing to come down to $20, I can guarantee like 100 hours of work. And essentially from a complimenting angle. There's no reason to insult these people and say that they're not worth the money that they think they are. But instead saying like you don't have the money, which is often the case. I mean, I've gotten people down from $60 an hour to like $25 an hour just because their work is phenomenal. They're 100% worth 60, but I can't afford it. And one of the things that I often do have is longer term work. That is also kind of a cliche in the freelancing world. If a client will promise you longer term work, that it's often something it's a negotiation tactic and not something that's real. So freelancers are also typically aware of this. So just be able to prove that you have that much work, I think is also important. So saying that you have 100 hours of work, but then showing them, hey, I need this website, I need this app, I need this design system, like all of these different things to give them, to actually back up those words and to back up and say that, hey, like I can give you 100 hours of work, I just can't afford it at that hourly rate. And that normally works for me. You can also see how the freelancer is doing. You can actually look at their profile on Upwork, and if they don't have any active clients and they haven't had any active clients for a while, but they're actively applying to jobs, then it's typically an indication that it might be a bit of a lean time for them. So you could get a lower price. But one of the downsides of negotiating is then you become the lowest person on the totem pole. So if another client comes along and they're able to get more work, that person's going to be prioritized because that person makes them more money. So yes, you can negotiate, yes, you can get the prices down, but just realize that by being a lower price than your other competitors, in a sense, you're going to be deprioritized and projects will take longer. Like there was this one app, it was actually my first failure in 3 years, I'm embarrassed to admit, but I negotiated the guy down from like, I think it was $1,300 down to $300 because I realized he didn't have any work. But then like a month into the project, he essentially finished the project. He just, at the back end part, he just had to finish the front end. He started getting more clients. So then essentially that month of almost completing then turned into 2 months of being almost there. And then ultimately he just decided it was not worth continuing to get that kind of money because he had other clients who were paying him a lot more. So I was able to essentially take advantage of a lean period and get a good price, but it didn't make sense for him. So also keep in mind that these folks need to feed themselves, feed their families. If you negotiated too well, you got them to say yes to something that they really shouldn't have said yes to, it's gonna hurt both of you. And that was a situation where I did that. So yes, you can negotiate, and yes, people will say yes to you, but also realize that they might not actually be able to afford it. And if another client comes along, they're going to put more work into that other client and deprioritize you. And ultimately that can lead to project failures, like in that case. Yeah, I'm still trying to make that app, but I don't want to skimp out again. So it's gonna end up being around $1,200 to make that product. So yes, you can negotiate. Essentially there's two ways to do it. You either try to reduce the hourly rate, if they're hourly, or if it's fixed price, then you try to reduce the scope of the product so that it fits within that price parameter for them. Oftentimes, if you work with an agency or you work with an individual who's a bit more organized, they'll send you a quote with a breakdown of where all the money's going, and then you can see what is taking them the most time, and then actually descope it. So, for instance, the animations on a product typically take a lot of time. Animations, forms, video, light boxes, these kind of interactions, they end up taking a lot more time and costing more money. Do you really want to have the super fancy schmancy interaction, or would you rather save $100? So that's kind of where you can see that breakdown as well. You can also ask for one. That's one thing. And then the other thing is to reduce the hourly rate, don't say they're not worth how much they think they're worth. And that's just insulting. Kind of come up with it with the complimenting angle, say, hey, I love your work. I wish I could afford it. I just want you to know that you're fantastic. If you're ever available at $20 an hour or whatever rate you're comfortable starting at, just ask. A lot of times people are open to negotiation, and a lot of times you can see how much work they actually have on their plate. If you see that someone doesn't have much work, they might say yes to something that they're not comfortable with. So always double check that they are comfortable with the scope and the price, because price is important. It's how you feed yourself, it's how you take care of yourself, it's how you essentially buy everything in this world. So if someone is not comfortable with the price, they're going to score them, they're not going to be happy with that project. So make sure that both parties are happy with the price, whether it's reducing the hourly rate and then increasing the number of total hours, or if it's reducing the scope on your end to meet that budget that you have. There's lots of ways to negotiate, but always come at it from a what is this person looking for type of angle. Because if you're just trying to save money for yourself for no reason, it's not very effective and it's not very genuine. If you have the money to afford somebody at the rate that they're asking for, I would always go with that route first. Typically with my personal projects, I don't, but when I'm working with clients, I negotiate a little bit because they're normally startups, but I won't try to be too brutal. So just understand that there's peaks and troughs in freelancing, and if you happen to catch somebody in a trough, realize that if you negotiate too well, when they hit that peak again, you will get deprioritized, and it might be worth bumping up their salary if they are worth it.